Good afternoon, everyone. It's Whiskey Wednesday, and Mark Gillespie in the WhiskyCast.com studio in Haddonfield, New Jersey. Hope your week has been a good one, and we're halfway through it, halfway back to the weekend, gang. I won't use the hump day reference. Well, I guess I just did, but be that as it may, we have a great lineup for you today. I'll be joined in just a minute by Randy Prasse, the new Chief Operating Officer for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, which gets underway tomorrow, physically in Bardstown, but in reality, virtually online worldwide because of the pandemic this year. After that, we'll be joined by the whole gang from Milam Greene Whisky down in Blanco, Texas, just outside of Austin. Marsha Milam, the founder, Heather Greene, the CEO, Jordan Osborne, the brewer and distiller, and Marlene Holmes, the master distiller. You may have heard Marlene if you've listened to this week's edition of WhiskyCast already. She shared one of her Booker Knows stories with us on Behind the Label this week from her days working at Jim Beam up in Kentucky. Spent 27 years up there before she was lured down to Texas. And we'll talk with all four of them in just a few minutes. Right now, I want to bring in Randy Prasse, the Chief Executive Officer of the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, the head honcho in Bardstown. Randy, how are things going? You're pretty busy, I would assume, right now.
Hey, Mark. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I mean, this week, it's festival week, but it's actually a different vibe, and we're pretty quiet, and it's the calm before the storm, for sure. But thanks for having me.
So tell us what's going on with the festival this year, what you've got going virtually, since we couldn't all be together in Bardstown.
Right, and it's less than ideal no matter what. But I mean, my whole objective is to bring the event up a notch, bring some world-class quality to our presenters, to our distillery, master distillers, and I feel like we did that. And this was supposed to be the live event up until about a month ago, and we finally pulled the plug and decided to go virtual. So all of the content, all of that, the master distillers and all of that great content is the same. It's just going to be now offered up to the whole world to participate in, as opposed to expecting everyone to come to Bardstown this year. But
give us some examples with some of the master distillers. I know we had Steve Combs on a couple of weeks ago on the Friday night happy hour show, and he did a bunch of videos for you, but give us a sense of what people will be able to experience virtually.
Well, I mean, we wanted to be very cognizant of the various degrees of sophistication that our consumers have, which is increasingly higher and higher and higher as time goes by. But we also didn't want to assume that some of the newcomers to the distilling were going to be able to also entertain them and educate them and give them a great experience. So we have a 5-part art of whiskey making, with the distilling and the fermentation, the aging. We have a session on blending with Brent Elliott, Four Roses. I mean, who else is better to talk about that? We've got Denny Potter with Maker's Mark coming in. We've got Steve Nally, the former Maker's Mark master distiller, who's now with Bardstown Bourbon Company. Connor O'Driscoll. I mean, it's just really, you can't get better experts in the industry, and they're all made themselves available for us, and then ultimately for everyone out there in the viewing audience.
And this is a preview of what we're going to see next year, when hopefully we can all be together in Bardstown, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's a little bit of, it's audience building for sure. It's getting ourselves turned on to new people. They want to see the quality we're doing. It's us flexing our muscles a little bit to show that there are a lot of festivals, a lot of events out there that have bourbon, but there's only one Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and we just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that we were going to take this very seriously and bring a world-class event out to you.
Now, when we've talked before in the run-up to this, with the coverage of having to move it to October and all, you'd mentioned before that there were a lot of concerns that this had really sort of become more of a local festival and really focused on Bardstown in recent years. What are you doing to try to make this more of a national and international event? You've always had people coming into Bardstown for the festival. I know I've got friends that have come in from Australia almost every year for the festival, but a lot of people come in for it. Now, what are you going to do to try to make it more of an event, as an international event, as opposed to strictly a local fall festival that just happens to get a big audience from outside of town?
Right. Well, and we want to be very respectful to the community. This is a huge piece of what defines Bardstown and this whole region. So we're not going to be taking the festival away from Bardstown, but what we're going to be doing is we're asking the community to kind of change its role. We're asking them to roll out the red carpet, put on a fresh coat of paint, make sure that it truly is one of the best small towns in America, and play that role, while we take the entertainment level up, the educational level, the overall experience level will go up. So where people who maybe are watching right now have been to the festival would have seen maybe some bouncy houses and some of the, you know, fair and festival type food, we are doing away with all of that. We're going to be a very serious 21 plus experience. So as much as I love the families and all of that experience, you're not going to have the strollers and the bouncy houses and the face things. And quite frankly, I've told the Bardstown community leaders there are 51 other weekends of the year to do the street fairs and the community festivals. This really is long-term going to showcase the festival and the community to a whole different audience, which is ultimately what we're trying to do.
Wait a second. Bouncy houses and bourbon can go just fine together in moderation. There's nothing against bouncy houses and bourbon if you do it right.
With the proper and liability insurance, I'm sure it's a wonderful combination.
Well, you got to keep the insurance agents busy. A serious question, though. What do you think the economic impact of losing the physical festival is going to be this year for Bardstown?
Well, you know, the community itself is still open for business, and like any other community, yes, it's restrictions on how many people can gather together, and so the restaurants, the bars, the retailers are still open. Most of the distilleries are doing some kind of tours, albeit at a reduced amount. There's still a lot of pent-up demand. If you go through Bardstown, especially with this wonderful weather, on any Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there are people in town. The town square is packed. So as far as the community, I feel like the community's faring pretty well from an economic, they're doing as well as they can. But certainly, I mean, someone likened the Bourbon Festival weekend to Black Friday in a traditional retail type of a situation where it is that big of a boom. Rather than canceling it, though, we really wanted to do something that was still going to be representing the community, making the community proud, putting the word Bardstown and Kentucky out on the international map. And again, what we're doing here is going to be a lot more of a marketing message than probably a traditional advertising that the tourism office could be doing. So we're still very much showcasing the community, just to a lot greater audience.
I know when I was out there a couple months back, and I was at the Hampton Inn talking with Ted, the general manager out there, and I know he compares Bourbon Festival more to the equivalent of Derby weekend,
sure,
in terms of the amount of crowds it brings in. And you've got some history with the Derby as well, but still, this would have been a weekend where every hotel in town would have been sold out, the restaurants would have been jammed, and so there is obviously some economic issue there.
It always is, though, Mark. Let me just interrupt there. The hotels are already busy. There are people coming in, they're emailing and calling us. Hey, we're in Bardstown this weekend. It's a big time of year for tourism anyway. So the hotels are full. We're just doing everything we can to make sure that A, they're aware of us being virtual, and B, get out of the hotel room and go experience the community.
Well, the events, correct me if I'm wrong, but all the virtual events are free this weekend, right?
Correct.
So anybody in the world, anybody that's watching tonight can take part starting tomorrow, right?
Absolutely. They can play along at home. We've got multiple cocktail quickies, so you can actually play along at home. The recipe cards for the recipes: Thomas Bolton from Maker's Mark, Samantha Montgomery from Bardstown Bourbon Company, and then Beth Burrows with Jim Beam. They're all going to be, I mean, these are the master bartenders. They're out there all over the world showing how to do it. We've got them here this weekend, and the recipe cards, so you can go out and buy your product ahead of time and play along.
And those recipe cards were in the gift box you guys sent over the other day, along with the bourbon socks, and thank you very much for those.
You're welcome.
And we'll post those recipes in the cocktail collections at whiskycast.com so that they live on after the Bourbon Festival. But once again, kybourbonfestival.com is the website. And as you said, people can show up all weekend long starting tomorrow, all throughout the weekend. Will the content be available after this weekend as well, or just through the weekend?
No, it's we actually produced it to be evergreen. So not only will it be on our YouTube channel, but it'll also be housed on our website with links. Because again, the industry has changed, and certainly the consumers and the sophistication, but the topics we're talking about is still pretty basic, right down the middle, great content. So our intention is to leave it up there. Next year's our 30th year. We absolutely hope and pray that we're going to be live and welcoming the world to come to see us again. But this is kind of a sample or teaser for what we're going to be able to try to pull off here next year.
Well, thank you for joining us. Give everybody in Bardstown our best, and hopefully we'll see you next year. And what's in that glass, by the way?
Kentucky bourbon.
Which one?
I can't tell you. It's just really great bourbon.
Oh, come on. You can tell us which one. It's okay.
I
know you drink them all, but...
I actually had, when I came in the door, I was coming in a little bit hot, and the first bottle that was right out in front was a single barrel. So this
didn't say, you dropped the name on there. Which one was it?
Four Roses.
Okay. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. So, Randy, thank you again, and we'll see you next year, hopefully. And next time I get to Bardstown, we'll stop by the office and say hello.
Please do, Mark, and everyone out there, cheers.
Okay, thank you, Randy. And once again, that's Randy Prasse from the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. Whoops. Let's change things around just a little bit here. And Randy was only going to stay with us for a few minutes because he has a dinner engagement at 6 o'clock that he needs to get to. So we really appreciate him joining us for a few minutes. Now it's time to bring in our next guests. Before I do, though, just a reminder, as you've seen comments on the screen already throughout the show, we'll take your comments and your questions. You can put them up on YouTube, along with the Facebook page, and also on Periscope. I say this every time. If you're watching us on Twitter, don't respond with the video link that you see in the window with the tweet, because we won't see that till after the show. But let's bring in our guests now, and we'll start bringing them in here slowly, because Marsha Milam from Milam Greene, also Heather Greene, the other half of Milam Greene, Jordan Osborne, and Marlene Holmes just sat down. So how's everybody tonight?
Good.
Now,
how are you?
We're doing great. Now, thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we won't talk over each other right now. And it's rare that we bring on more than one person from the same distillery, but when you get the chance to basically have the entire team, except for maybe a couple of folks who do tours and stuff from a distillery, it's kind of cool. And we had a interesting webinar the other night that you guys led, doing tastings through your new single barrel, along with a couple of the other whiskeys that you've produced. And Heather, let's start with you on this, because the single barrel that you're just now releasing is really part of the national rollout for Milam Greene, isn't it?
We have three brands that we're rolling out nationally. So that is one of them. It's the single barrel program that we'll be rolling out, in addition to the triple cask bourbon and our port finished rye. So all three will be available throughout. Most of the United States will have access to these products through either direct brick and mortar stores or through Washington, D.C. and California, where they're allowed to ship actually into other states, as long as your state accepts it.
So we have a question here from your pal, and full disclosure, your publicist, Mac McGinnis, wants to know what you're pouring for this chat. So let's go through and just see what's in everybody's glasses right now.
Oh, interesting to say that. I didn't have a glass in front of me, but I will very easily. I think what I'll do is pour. I'm gonna do the rye, port finished rye.
Now, Marsha, we feel sorry for you because you're not at the distillery. You're not at home. You are in a radio station up in Fort Worth tonight, right?
Right.
Which means that you don't have any whiskey with you.
I have some in the trunk of my car, and I should have brought a bottle up. I wasn't thinking.
It's okay, because you still have to drive after you leave here, and we don't want you to drink and drive.
Right.
We preach responsibility around here. And as Dave Kuhn points out, just take a swig from the bottle. No. I think he's referring to what Bill Ricker said. It's more cost-effective to buy sherry and Porto separately from whiskey, so he's helping empty those casks so they can be used for whiskey. Lovely. Spirit Bomb Tabitha. Port finished rye sounds incredible. It is incredible. I have my tasting notes for it up at the website. Tasted that one when it first came right out now, and
That's
Chris Ratcliffe.
That's doing really well. The port finished rye has this really beautiful, nice dark cherry chocolate flavor that just puts a nice sheen over that rye that you tend to get that spicy green. It really kind of rounds it out in a way that I haven't tasted in a rye before. So we're really excited about that. Jordan's drinking water.
Go ahead, Jordan. Jordan's got water.
Or white spirit.
Triple cask.
What's in the glass, Jordan?
I just poured a little bit of our triple cask.
Another good one.
Marlene,
And Marlene, what do you got?
Okay, well, we've got a round robin. It sounds like I've got a little bit of our grain to glass.
ooh.
Which is your new distillery exclusive, right?
It is, yes.
Which I have not tasted. That's the only one of yours that I have not tasted yet, and we
You
need
can
to.
taste a big. You can taste it it is in the triple cask. So what
Okay.
Marlene and Jordan have created is in the triple cask as well. So our grain to glass is in that one, in addition to having one at the distillery that's 100%. So we do both.
For the record, I am not drinking. Because I always have a policy. I stay neutral and don't drink anything from our guests when the show is on. And I was looking through the cabinet of oddities back here behind me and the wall of whiskey, and I found an Altmore 21-year-old from our friends at John Dewar and Sons. This was a sample they sent over back in 2014, and I still have some of it left. So this has been sitting for a while. So
That's a very old whiskey. How does it taste?
I'll tell you in a second.
Oldmore. I haven't had
No
that.
oxidation at all.
You went full Scotch on us.
Yours are out of reach. I can't. They're on my tape. They're on my desk over here, but this is one I need to finish off at some point. So let's talk first of all. Marsha, you founded this thing a few years ago after a long career, as part of a long career in the music business. But tell me about that first distilling attempt you made yourself, because you tried to start out yourself before you hired the pros here, right?
Well, more or less, yes. I took a few classes with, and actually spent a week with the guys at Cobalt up in Chicago, because I wanted to learn the business and wanted to learn how to distill. And I think entrepreneurs all have a similar personality trait, and that is that they think they can do anything and they think they can do everything. So I really thought, well, I will distill, and then of course I'll do the PR and marketing on it, and I'll do the sales. So it was a little naive. So the first still that I bought from the guys in Cobalt. It was from Austria, and I bought the smallest still that they had available, because one, I could get it quickly, and two, I thought if I blew it up, it wouldn't be a very bad explosion. So I didn't have a lot of faith in my distilling ability, and anybody who knows me knows I don't cook that much either. So it was a stretch. But yeah, I initially thought that I'd be out there, running around, fermenting, distilling, bottling. But as it turned out, that didn't work, and I met some phenomenal people, and they came on board.
And we were talking beforehand, and your main career has been in the music business, but when we were talking, you pointed out a lot of similarities between music and whiskey. And I'd sort of like you to share some of that, because I think there's a lot of things that people can get from this.
Well, I don't have the depth of knowledge that my three cohorts do here, but I've had a lot of life experience, and a lot of it has involved music and whiskey. And to me, the thing when it all began to make sense for me on whiskey was when I realized that everybody pretty much is dealing with the same three ingredients. Maybe you use wheat instead of corn, but everybody is dealing with the same initial raw materials. And yet you can, through the nuances and the way you play with it and the things you do, you can come up with things that are totally unique and original and really just specific to the way you did it. You know, what Heather was talking about with our port finished rye. You know, we've really created something that she had not experienced before. And my closest thing that I could wrap my head around with was a guitar. Because to me, I've always marveled, every guitar has the same shape, whether it's Fender, Strat, whoever, has 6 strings, but yet, if someone is really talented, they can get a singular sound out of there that you know on the second note. And that's what marvels me or amazes me about music, is that the nuances to it. And that's what amazes me about whiskey is, Heather says a lot of times, you know, we know about the terroir, however you say that. And you know the environment plays an effect, not just on wine, but also on whiskey. But she has pointed out that the people who make the whiskey, they are part of that atmosphere and environment. And each of them put a signature spin on what they create. And I feel like with our products, not to brag, but with Milam Greene, Jordan has been so deliberate, and so he explored so much and researched so much and came up with something that he liked, and it's uniquely his, and now that is uniquely ours, you know. And I feel like with Marlene, with her 27 years of experience, you know, we always say, these guys don't make bad whiskey, you know, it's not going to happen. And then Heather's really kind of opened up this world of being able to find these different casks and blend them together. So I feel like this team, we are creating a sound or a taste in our whiskey that is just as unique as some of the most famous guitar players have done with their instrument. And I'm really proud of that.
Great comment from Dave Kuhn here. One parallel between music and whiskey is the craft involved. Mm-hmm. Like any creative endeavor, the process is key to the final product. Distilling and songwriting are similar in that aspect. And Heather, I want you to talk to this because you used to be a singer as well as a brand ambassador and a writer and a little of everything in your whiskey career as well. So you've got some experience with this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of exactly what Marsha said. And in fact, Marsha and I met through a contact in the music industry, mm-hmm. through a friend who is a string arranger who had actually done the string arrangements for a record that I had made in 2000, actually. So I was a singer-songwriter, but it's what Marsha said. I mean, it's like, look, you know, in Western music and pop music, you have a scale, and we all have the same scale that we're playing off of. On a keyboard, I played keyboard, and it's how do you use those notes to create something new in your voice and lyrics. It's the same, you know. And like I said, it's very interesting to me because, like as Marsha said, and what Marlene and Jordan and all of us do here, it's like we opened up the toolbox of whiskey production. And we're doing our own. So we're actually, you know, I think distilling for any craft whiskey distillery is a prerequisite. So we're doing that. I mean, that's one chord, right? But then we have other things coming in. Those are other chords coming in. It's how does that all come together to make something really beautiful or unique, or, you know, have enough of a variety that you can go through maybe a portfolio of songs or whiskey to have them each be different. So yeah, I think I wrote about it in my book. There's a lot of parallels between music and whiskey, and it's what brought Marsha and I together, actually.
Marlene?
The person I'd ever met when I first met her. So it's like, oh my God.
Marlene, when you think about all this, because you grew up in the last 27 years at Jim Beam, when you hear about all this music and whiskey and stuff like that, does that make sense to you, or do you just want to make good whiskey?
Both. It makes sense, and I want to make good whiskey. Yeah, you know, growing up in Kentucky, it's a bluegrass state, so you know, listen to a lot of Bill Monroe and what have you, going to the bluegrass festival. But yeah, it goes hand in hand. I've spent a lot of time on back porch or around a campfire with a nice shot of whiskey and good music playing in the background. So it goes hand in hand.
So tell me the story of how you got recruited to come. I'm sorry, Heather, go ahead. What?
I said there's always music playing at the distillery.
Always music.
Always.
So Marlene, tell us the story of how Marsha got you to come down initially just to visit and then wound up staying.
Well, it was a mutual friend. It was somebody that I had worked with for several years there at Beam, and he knew Marsha, and he knew what kind of interest I had approaching retirement, and so that weekend when I come down, speaking of music, was filled with a lot of music right off the bat. That was the first thing we did when we hit Austin, is went and listened to some great live music and had some good food. And she poured it on pretty thick that weekend. So it was hard to say no, I can tell you that.
Okay, whose phone is ringing?
I'm sorry. I'm at the distillery, and it's a working day.
Of course.
That's me.
If you need to jump away, do something, and check the phone and make sure the place doesn't blow up, go right ahead.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
We have other people there.
Jordan, you actually built the current still that you guys are using, right?
I did not build it. No, Vendome built it. But I was definitely involved. Yeah, I was definitely involved in the setup and all of the supporting equipment to make that still work. So. Yep.
So tell me how you got involved in all this. How did you wind up? What's your background, and how did you wind up with Milam Greene, originally the Ben Milam Distillery, as it was called back in the day?
Yeah. So really, I'm a brewer by trade. I started out in the brewing industry in Colorado, and at the time, this was I think almost 4 years ago. Marsha was getting this thing rolling, or she'd been working on it for a couple years prior, but she was really looking for a brewer, just because that part is so, the whiskey making process, she really keen on that's such an important process. So she wanted to find an actual brewer, which is kind of, you don't see that a lot in distilleries, but we got connected online, and I came down for an interview and really kind of hit it off. And a couple months later came on board, and kind of the rest is history. So yeah, we just, with the brewing aspect, we just recognize how much attention to detail, how that's important in the process. And so we just research.
And you also came up with the yeast strain yourself for this, right? You didn't use a standard stock yeast strain.
Well, we came up with a blend of yeast strains. So we used two different types, and that was we played with that for, a couple months to really dial that in. But that was something, I was a part of coming up with and sourcing the grains. We also decided to go with a malted rye, which I was real familiar with from the brewing industry. I've seen great results with it. So it was natural to try that at first. And then the results we saw in the distillate were pretty phenomenal. So we stuck with it taste wise, and then conversion wise in the mash, it really performs well. So
Marlene, I want you to tell us how you're distilling both in Blanco, Texas at your distillery, but then you also work up in Bardstown with the folks at Bardstown Bourbon Company, right?
Yeah, that's right, Mark. Yeah, Jordan and I went up last year and spent a week with the guys there at Bardstown Bourbon. Great group of folks up there. John Hargrove, Nick Smith, Kerry Hutchins. I knew those people. I worked with some of them at Beam, and they've been in the business for a while. And they opened their doors to Jordan and I, and it was pretty cool to be able to go back to Kentucky and visit family and work with those guys. They do a sweet mash, and we gave them our mash bill, our yeast, and they follow to a T, the temperature, time and temperature on the process, and it was a lot of fun working with them, though. They're a good bunch of folks.
Now, the climates are a lot different between Texas and Kentucky. Are you noticing any difference in the spirit between those when they mature, when you get it down to, are you maturing the Kentucky spirit in Kentucky, or are you bringing it down to Texas?
Yeah, we're doing both. We, Mark, we left the majority of our barrels in Kentucky. We did bring some back to Texas with us. We've got them here in our brick house in Blanco, and they pull samples for us there in Kentucky, and we pull samples here, and we're comparing. It hadn't been quite a year yet, so the samples we've pulled so far, there's not that much difference in them, but still young yet, not quite a year old.
Now, explain to me why you decided to take the tack, Heather, of becoming an independent bottler, essentially, in addition to a distiller. It's not unusual in Scotland, but it is unusual in the States.
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's not so unusual in the States. We walked away from it for a while. Like the idea of finding casks and bottling them and curating them and paying attention to them has been going on here. I think what's interesting is for a little while, we moved away from that whole idea, and we called it like sourced, they would call it sourced here. But it's not really just quite that. It's really about us. Like we are looking for, and we will actively in the future look for the best cask for a single barrel program. So it could be ours. It could be stuff that we find, and it is inspired by all that, the way the rest of the world, does operate that way, or Scotland, I'm sorry, with a big chunk of the whiskey world. So. And it was also when we joined, or we all got together, Marsha had actually, she could tell you about it. I mean, she spent a lot of time trying to find, she knew that to start any kind of distillery, she had to start not knowing how to really distill, how she needed to find some really beautiful barrels, and she did look and look and look, and then she landed on some. So our single barrel program is actually part of the history of our company. It's what Marsha had originally started. In fact, all of our packaging says, it even says from the Founders Reserve. So it's really just a part of who we are, as well as distilling on our own and then doing hybrids of ourselves. You need to create a personality of that terroir, or as Marsha said, it's partly the people. Like we have to put who we are as a characterful element into our whiskey as well. So, it's really about, I think really what it's about is being able to offer consumers from an experienced whiskey team what we believe would be a really beautiful range of whiskeys, and opening it up so that you have more tools in the toolbox to do that. And other distillers around the world have done that for some time. And I think it's really fun to be able to offer up independent bottles sourced or different places that we find them, and then using them in different ways, aging them in different ways, finishing them in other ways. I mean, the fact that we actually are working with Bardstown to go in there and actually work with them as, they're spearheading it out. It's so giant. We need more than just two people working at Bardstown, but it's just part of it. It's like, well, you want more spices in your cabinet to create beautiful whiskeys, not less. And it's really simply comes down to that. You want more notes.
Marlene, you kind of got photobombed a second ago. Somebody was walking in there behind you, waving into the camera. You want to call him out? Who was that?
Well, that's one of the guys here that we work with. That's Canyon. He's been with us a couple of years now. He walked into the distillery almost 2 years ago looking for a job, and big, sturdy, strong-looking young man. I thought, he'll be able to handle a barrel no problem. So we hired him, and after about a week, I asked him, I said, Canyon, so what do you think about working in a distillery? And he goes, oh yeah. He says, I want to be a distiller. And so that's who he was. We're just waiting on a shipment to go out the gate. So he was passing a little bit of information along on that.
We're very excited. Mark, as you know, this is the week where we are first, this month actually, and this week are the first big orders going outside of Texas. So we're really excited about that. And there's lots of activity at the distillery for that reason.
And congratulations, because that first step when you go outside of your home state is always a big one for every small distiller. So congratulations to all of you on that. That's really a great accomplishment.
Thanks, Mark. We're super excited about it. Yeah.
Now, but this was also something you weren't really ready to do or planning to do for a few years yet, because the pandemic sort of made this happen, didn't it?
It did. Absolutely. I think, the general rule, and of course with this team, Marsha has never followed she's a rock and roller at heart. So, we don't abide by everyone's rules. But the general rule is that you really double down on your home state, you grow the market. I've worked with brands for a long time, but of course the pandemic makes everybody rethink strategy, makes everybody think, how are you going to grow? How are you going to do this? And, with Marlene's in particular contacts and my contacts outside in the industry, it really made sense for our whiskey distillery in particular to get out pretty quickly and to tap into these long relationships that we had, loyalty and trust that what we were making was going to be something that consumers wanted. We were seeing great press. We were seeing good awards already. We were super psyched about we drink our whiskey, and we're whiskey drinkers. So we knew that it was something that it was a low risk for, when consumers like it. And so we just kind of did it. We pivoted quickly, called in relationships that we had. We're working with lots of distributor partners that we've known for a long time, retailers that I really enjoy talking to, many of them that and things like that. So just seemed like the right move to run it.
Heather, I have to ask you, what was the hardest part about making the transition to Austin for you, besides the heat?
I think the hardest transition was not seeing family and friends, because that was never part of the equation. I thought I'd be able to see them more often, but with the pandemic, I can't. So very, very simple answer to that was all my community, my family and friends. But I've made a great community down here. Look at these amazing people. But I would say that's the hardest. Not seeing my sisters or friends and things like that. That's tough.
You have learned to not walk around barefoot because of the fire ants, right?
I learned that the hard way. Yeah. Taking a walk, and my dog learned you don't pee against a cactus. That didn't go so well for him. Little boy dog ended up at the vet with little cactus spines coming out of his leg. We're like, don't go near the cactus.
For the record, I lived in Houston for 5 years, so I know from fire ants, and those little bastards will eat you alive.
They'll hurt you.
Yeah.
Now we have a great question from Whiskey Canuck up in Canada. I'm into Scotch, but don't know much about bourbon. What would you suggest as your gateway bourbon for a Scotch lover? I have you only really have the one bourbon, so right now the triple cask, right?
That's our triple cask, but actually I would say that for people who are into Scotch, for us, the port finished rye, because the port adds a dryness to it that Scotch drinkers tend to really like, actually. I get that over and over and over again. And it's inspired by the great finishes of, Glenmorangie and Balvenie and those kinds of brands. So I would say for a Scotch person, something like that would be good. It's a very different approach. Scotch whiskey, as you know, they say, when they say something sweet, they mean within the Scotch world, but any Scotch you compare pretty much to a bourbon, it's going to taste much drier because of the new oak character that we have. So we taste a lot of maple syrup in American bourbons. There's a lot of, just big, bold, robust flavors. It's very different. It's very different. So I would actually, for our range, I'd say the port finish rye would be a good jumping point, because you get a little more of that dryness and robustness you get from a Scotch what meat doesn't taste like Scotch, but I think that's a good gateway for that.
But Heather, this gentleman's in Canada, so until he can get ours, what would you suggest? Like,
and a parallel on this, Dave Kuhn points out there are some great rye finished in European oak, but Spirit Bomb Tabitha over in the UK has a question. I know bourbon has to be matured in virgin oak, but can it be European or Japanese oak? It has to be American oak, right?
yes.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to confirm that. And Graham Fraser, good question here. Wondered how old whiskeys can age to maturation in the Texas climate. I know you guys have only been distilling for a few years, but realistically, we haven't had much in the way of craft distilling for much more than maybe 10, 12 years now. So we really don't know yet, do we?
We don't know.
No.
We'll find out. Yeah, it's a good question. We love that experimentation aspect of it down here. I'm not sure what's going to happen in 10 years. You know, is that a Scotch person asking the question, or is that an American person?
That was an English person. Graham Fraser's from the UK. I know.
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
Yeah. So one of the things, the approach to American, if you are familiar with, if you drink a lot of Scotch whiskey and you've cut your teeth on European style whiskeys, the approach in America is very, very different. We age, just in general America, let alone Texas, which is even quicker. But in general, when you are at a 12, 15-year-old whiskey in America, you're already getting into your older vintages. That's your kind of ground floor young whiskey in Scotland. So you got to reframe your thinking when you come from Scotland, drinking a lot of European whiskeys, to coming to American whiskeys. And the way I describe it, or a lot of whiskey people describe it, is like that first dunk of a tea bag. You get a lot of flavors, you get a lot of tannins really, really fast in a bourbon or an American whiskey, because it is in that new virgin oak. Once that there's this strong flavors extracted, you don't want to keep it in there for too long. It actually starts to turn. So American whiskeys skew younger over time, skew much, much younger than Scotch whiskey. So a 12-year-old is your young, you know, when you work in those, the big Scotch whiskeys, they're generally 12 is very young, very different than here. So I would say, you know, you wouldn't really want to taste a Texan whiskey at a 15, 20 years old. I bet you there wouldn't be much in the cask and it would taste like a toothpick.
I want to try it once, but I'm not sure I want to buy a bottle of it.
Yeah, I would say, you know, try it once.
Let's answer a question for Greg Berger. He wants to bring a group out to your place in Blanco October 31st for Halloween, and he's hoping you're open then. Are you guys open to visitors yet?
Well, we watch what the government's doing, what they are letting us do or not do. At the moment, we are open on the lawn. We have a really beautiful place under a giant oak tree to sit, but we have to, we really have to pay attention to, you know, what's going on. So anybody's guess, but right now we're open for cocktails on our outside lawn.
So Greg can at least bring his friends by over for cocktails.
Right.
Today, yeah. But
and to buy your distillery exclusive.
Yes, of course.
Oh, let's see here. I'm going through the comments. We've had comments on those. Whiskey Canuck is going, as a Canadian, I approve of maple syrup notes. Yes, we always approve of that. Watchman 999, have you had the Knob Creek maple, the smoked maple? That's the one we refer to around here as 10 a.m. whiskey because it smells like whiskey. It smells like pancakes and bacon.
Marlene, have you had it?
I have. As I think I've even got a bottle of it still. Yes, it is. It's great.
That's the one we have around on Christmas morning. We'll serve that instead of mimosas on Christmas morning.
Right.
To everybody except the grandson. He's only 8.
Hey,
He's my heir apparent. What, Heather?
Ask Marlene a question. What are your friends and family? We never even asked you that. Like, are they think you're just nuts for being in Texas? Do they like what they've tasted so far?
Oh no, they love it. They've got a vacation place to come to, so they think it's great on that aspect. Now, so they most of the family has been down to visit, and so they enjoy coming down and they know I love what I'm doing. So, and I'm having fun at it. So they're happy for me.
So today is our first day that we're allowed to be, the Texan distillers and bars are allowed to be open at, I think, 50%. Is it, Marsha, or it's 50%, right?
Mhm.
So that's why you're hearing a lot of activity as well.
50% indoors, unlimited outdoors.
Okay, yeah.
Because remember checking the rules on that for the store. By the way, I was able to reach over and find my sample of the single barrel bourbon.
Ooh, good.
So,
perfect.
and I had my tasting notes for this on the show this week. So if you haven't listened to this week's podcast yet, you're going to want to listen because you will have my tasting notes on this weekend's show. So let's see here. Good questions here. And since you guys are doing this just now, I think it's a great question from our pal Chris Ratcliffe, one of the contributors to WhiskyCast. When you're creating a new whiskey and a house style, where is your starting point? And do you benchmark other whiskeys to develop a description and your house style? So for the whiskeys you're making in Blanco, will those have a different house style than what you're doing, say, in Bardstown?
I think when I think of I'll answer and then Jordan and Marlene can answer. So when I think about house style, it's like you want it. I think what we wanted to do is create really beautiful whiskeys that could compete with the best Kentucky whiskeys, that could compete with great whiskeys on the shelf there. So I think that was really part of the model for us, is to be able to do something, because as I said, we're all serious whiskey drinkers. So that's the benchmark that we compare ourselves to, despite a lot of people saying, how do you compare to other Texas whiskeys? Or, when people say, and I'm like, this isn't where we measured ourselves against. I knew personally from when I was working as a buyer, like at the Flatiron Room in Manhattan, that customers really love traditional style American whiskeys. And I think we went for something like that. And I think even what we're starting to do, our new whiskeys in Texas really mimic a really beautiful Kentucky style of whiskey that Jordan and Marlene have created, with a bit of a little bit of spice that you really get. I call it like a little Texas kick. So then I'll let my team see what they think, because they're all there every day too, comparing and tasting, and they've got their fantasies as well of where they want to be.
Well, let's hear from Jordan, because Jordan hasn't gotten a word in edgewise for a while here yet. So
Right.
Explain that. And is there a Texas style of whiskey yet? I think everybody in Texas is still trying to figure this out. Is there a Texas style?
I think it's more of a regional style, because Texas is such a large state. But again, we're so young in the industry in Texas that we're finding these things out as they come. But yeah, we, like Heather said, we really set out to make whiskeys that can sit next to some of the best coming out of Kentucky and Tennessee, some of those benchmark whiskeys. I guess when we're starting to make a whiskey, we're looking at the grains, obviously, and we're really looking for something that's going to be really nice and well balanced. And there's just a lot of playing involved until we come out. Really, the best test is tasting it along the way, and that's something we'll do in the mash, we'll do in the fermentation, the low wine distillation, the final distillation, just because it gives you so much detail about what's happening and how those changes are coming about. So there's just so many factors too. Like Marlene mentioned, we bring our mash bill to Kentucky when we distill out there, but we also know at the same time, there's different water out there. We can only control so much. So each distillate coming from different places is going to be really special and really great, but there's going to be some subtle differences, and we know that. And then we get to have fun with that in the blending process in our products as well.
Comment from Peter Green. We are watching with a wee dram of your triple cask here in Baltimore.
Awesome.
So we know at least it has gotten as far as Baltimore so far.
That's great.
That's pretty fantastic.
That's great.
I think I know that person.
Whiskey Connect. To my knowledge, Texas whiskey is relatively new. Is there a lot of cooperation among all these new distilleries in the state, as so many of you are in startup mode? Marlene, maybe you can best answer this because you were from Kentucky originally, where all the distillers worked together and got along with each other while competing. Is there that same sense of cooperation in Texas yet?
Yeah, there is. I met a lot of the folks down here. It was the first fall I was here over in the San Antonio Cocktail Conference, and yeah, they were super nice. All of them was, if there's anything we can do for you guys, you got questions. They were very open. And actually, I've got a couple of guys real close to me, within a couple of miles, that are making some real nice whiskey. And we travel back and forth, chatting with one another, just kind of picking one another's brain. But yeah, it's we're all in this together, and it's something that people in this business, they're in it because they have a passion and they love what they do. And so, yeah, it's the folks down here, it's a lot like Kentucky. It reminded me a lot of Kentucky, actually.
And a question from Dave Kuhn. Maybe you can answer this, Marlene. What's the most traditional style American whiskey brand? Would it be Jim Beam? They certainly dominate the bourbon barrel export business. Being at Beam for 27 years, you get a real intimate knowledge of the entire portfolio up there. Is there a most traditional style American whiskey brand? And obviously you guys would like to be it at some point and define that as what Milam Greene is eventually, but how do you get there, and how much did you model Milam Greene's whiskeys after what you learned at Jim Beam over the years?
Well, it's the same process. People have been making whiskey for a long time. For centuries, and the process is still the same. The equipment's changed, the technology has changed, but our thing here is we just try to make the best product that we absolutely can. I tell folks that we taste through every step of our process here, from the mash all the way to the final distillate to when we dump a barrel. What's going in a bottle, we taste. So, Jordan and them pretty much had the foundation as far as the yeast and the mash bill established when I come on board, and I just, try to carry that on and do what I learned from the older folks back home, when I started in the business 30 years ago.
And Jordan, I want to ask you real quickly, how hard is it to get your fermentations done properly during the summers down there? Because it's during the summer, most of the time in the hill country in Texas, it's surface of the sun level hot.
Right.
So how do you keep your fermentations cool and enough to actually let them run for a while?
Well, we've got cooling capacity and solenoid valves and a glycol chiller and temp control that helps us maintain the same temperatures. We will see some little fluctuations in the winter and the summer. Obviously, those fermentations are going to end a little sooner in the winter because of the colder temperatures. In the summer, the fermentation is going to be a little longer in the winter because it's cooler, and then a little quicker in the summertime. But we're able to control them really pretty well throughout the summer due to our equipment. So, we've had a little bit of issues at times, maybe going a degree or two higher than we want to, but we haven't seen any negative effects. So you're right, it does get very hot in Texas, but thankfully we've got solid equipment that we're able to kind of harness and control that temperature best we can.
And that leads to this question from Dave Kuhn. Is there an advantage to coaxing younger bourbon to mature in the warm Kentucky and Texas climate versus the cool, damp environment of those Scottish warehouses? I would think the heat could speed up flavor a bit. Well, it's been said, I know that in Kentucky, 1 year in Kentucky is equivalent to 3 years in Scotland. I'm not sure about an equivalence between Texas and Scotland, but it's got to be at least that, if not more.
Again, I think kind of what Jordan said, Texas is giant, and you can fit 3 Scotlands in Texas. So I think it's different, not only because of temperature, but also you got to think about humidity and how those humidity levels also affect the temperature, and about, all of those things are variables in your whiskey making. And I think people in Scotland or Dave, it sounds like you're from the UK. Our Scotch drinker, I think you'd be really surprised. Actually, in Hill Country, from January to about April, it's quite temperate. It can be hot, but you can have days where it's very similar to, say, springtime in southern part, the lowland part of Scotland. So, this is central Texas, Hill Country. I'm talking about, not really south where Houston's very hot, or very more north where you've got the winds coming down from like the north and things like that. So I would say that it's not just a direct ratio of like, cut it in half. Now you got Kentucky, now you cut it in half again. It's Texas. There's just really so much more that goes on in that warehouse that's very mysterious.
And that leads to a question from Chris Ratcliffe. How greedy are the Angels in Texas?
13%, isn't it?
They're drinking a lot of whiskey, right, Jordan, Marlene?
They get their share.
Year one, we'll see about 12%, and then it starts to taper off a little bit. So the other
12% for first year. How does that compare to Kentucky, Marlene?
If I remember right, Mark, I think in Kentucky it was around 8%, 8 or 10% the first year, and then it tapers off, the second and third and so on. Yeah. So it's a little more down here. Yeah.
The Angels in Texas have it great.
Yeah.
But Mark, back to the question.
Go ahead,
Marsha.
Back to the question on comparing how things age in Texas versus other places. When we started on the port finished rye, I think Heather had talked to some folks in Scotland, right, Heather? And they said, in Scotland, it would be a year or year and a half to finish something like that.
Yeah, like 9 months, a while, at least to start getting some good flavor.
And Blanco, Marlene, it was what, 9 weeks or when you?
Yeah. The first fill there, go around was about 6 or 7 weeks, and then and I don't think we've had any in a barrel any longer than 5 months. Is about the longest we finished out.
Yeah, so it happens.
Great line from Chris Ratcliffe. The whiskey matures fast and the brisket cooks slow in Texas.
That's right.
That's good. I like that. Blimey.
Marlene, have you found any barbecue in Texas that is even half, or that compares to Kentucky at all? I know this is just starting trouble, but I'm going to start trouble.
Boy, you're treading into deep water there, Mark, with that. Yeah,
I know.
Actually, there's just not too far from us. We have a fabulous barbecue place right here in Blanco, in our hometown, and so we use them quite often. But I love the Owensboro barbecue back home. I kind of like that barbecue where when you eat it, it's you got it dripping off your chin. So they both have their good points. That's for sure.
When she's in Texas, she says Texas barbecue's better. When she's in Kentucky, she says it's better. And then now she doesn't have to choose because she distills both in Kentucky and Texas. But really, Texas is now starting to make better whiskey with a much bigger, more characterful flavor.
Well, we're getting more comments now about Salt Lick Barbecue works for me. Franklin is the best barbecue in the country. I'd queue for Franklin. And Crumpler. Once again, Mark, there is no barbecue made outside of Eastern North Carolina. Oh, yeah, right, Crumpler. Yeah, nice try.
I like
our audience.
I like Owensboro style barbecue too, Marlene, and because I grew up in Illinois and I love those little baby back ribs. And God, they're so good. And the first time I had barbecue in Texas, I mean, the ribs were like this big. I was like, what is this? It's a whole different animal. And it is. It's beef and not pork. But yeah, Texas barbecue is good.
I will tell you the best burger I've ever had in my life was when I was living in Houston. There was this little hole in the wall shack under a freeway, under the Southwest Freeway at 610, just about like a few blocks from the office, little Bubba's Burger Shack. They would serve these bison burgers. There was just this little trailer like thing. And I would go there for lunch, and they had these bison burgers that were just, oh my God, I can still remember those 25 years later. They were that good. And I mean, if there is something about Texas and cooking over mesquite and cooking over scrub oak and stuff like that, that just, part of me wants to go back.
And an open flame.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Marsha, Marsha's driving straight up the country this week, aren't you? I think you're driving straight up to Chicago.
Bubba's is still open, Mark, just in case.
Yeah. I figured that thing would have burned down years ago.
Yeah, and the burger does look great. I'll tell you, I'm hungry. Yeah, I'm going to Chicago. I'm going to, we got into with a great group up there, and having grown up in Illinois, I've just been really wanting to get up there and go visit our whiskey in those stores. So I'm leaving Monday, and I will be in Chicago next week. Nice. So I'll be eating some Illinois barbecue up there.
Nice music.
Yeah, tell us how that works out. Chris Ratcliffe, Dave Kuhn, Corky's for me. Corky's in Memphis. Oh yeah, dry rub barbecue, the ribs at Corky's in Memphis. Oh yeah.
Well, what about the Rendezvous? Everybody in Memphis wants the Rendezvous, and I'll stay in Memphis one night. In Memphis, I believe the Rendezvous has barbecue bologna.
Wow.
Really?
Whoa.
Marsha,
yeah. I'm sorry. I live just outside of Philly now, so I deal with cheesesteaks instead of barbecue, and I'm going, barbecue bologna? No, thanks. Hard pass on that one, guys.
It's a delicacy.
So, when are we going to see a Milam Greene barbecue sauce then, with the whiskey in it?
Tomorrow. I don't know. We're working on it. Actually, we love our barbecue neighbor. I'm giving a shout out to Old 300 down in downtown Blanco because I love them.
Yeah.
Let's make a barbecue sauce. That'd be amazing.
So we've had some comments about the Angel's share, and somebody made a comment a few seconds ago about Watchman 99. When he was touring Garrison Brothers in Texas last year, they said their whiskey proofs up instead of down. So does the Angel's share refer to just the total volume of liquid that is lost each year? Well, yeah, but explain why it proofs up instead of down.
Sure. So the Angel share is the evaporation out of the liquid, and in high heat, the first molecules to really volatilize or evaporate will be your water, right? So more water evaporating out of your cask leaves more ethanol in your cask, which means your proof goes up. You've got more ethanol, less water, because it's evaporating versus the opposite.
Makes good sense to me. And Richard Dankovic says I should be familiar with Taylor's Ham in New Jersey. Actually, no, I'm not familiar with Taylor's Ham in New Jersey.
Taylor's
but
Ham
I will be this weekend.
Cheese. Taylor's egg and cheese on a bagel. Good stuff.
I'm sorry, what was that, Heather?
Taylor ham, egg and cheese on a bagel or a roll.
That's the North Jersey thing. I'm in South Jersey near Philly, so.
It's a Port Authority thing on your way out to Jersey.
Okay, so let's get back to whiskey now instead of food. What's the next thing we're going to see from you guys? What are you working on now?
Oh gosh, Mark, we're just getting these out. Well, we've got a couple things. I know these guys, Marlene and Jordan, can talk to you a little bit about some of the experiments we're doing. We do have a beautiful gin that we make. You can only get at the distillery. Mm-hmm. And then Jordan, Marlene, and we have a rare batch that we're going to put out in 2021. So just 20 barrels that we will put together to create 500, we're only going to do about 500 cases of that, old vintage whiskeys, put that together and release that as a barrel proof batch. Those are 3 things I can think of. But there's always little things that they have out in the distillery that up their sleeves. And then Marsha probably has her dreamy dog's paw whiskey. We think about that a lot too.
Let's hear about it.
Oh, I don't know. It was right after Heather came down. We both have dogs that we love, and they're really wonderful dogs. When she said what was the biggest adjustment, I thought it was going to be Frankie moving to Texas.
He doesn't like Texas.
Yeah. So we have a fantasy of a nice little whiskey that is called Dog Paw. And we'll have our dogs on there, and one of them will be the blender, and one will be the distiller. And
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
yeah.
Oh, Jordan likes it.
Well, there's the old tradition of the distiller's dog or the blender's dog, of the whiskey dog.
We all have dogs.
Well, no, like the dog thing that you'd sneak use that down and then use that to pull the cask out of. That was a distiller's dog.
Right.
So,
the thief.
and let me see if I can put that back in. Yes, I'm more flexible than I thought.
Whiskey
Gosh,
women.
Go and,
So, hey, I got a question for you guys. While we're talking about dogs, we got a puppy coming in a couple of weeks
ooh, my favorite topic.
to replace the wonderful one of the best dogs I've ever had, Bristow, that we lost. Our old English sheepdog we lost there this summer. We got a sheepadoodle puppy coming.
Sheepadoodle.
Yeah, sheepadoodle puppy coming, and we're debating names.
Oh.
And I need some opinions on this one because we were thinking about naming it Bader for certain reasons, which I won't go into politically because it's going to piss some people off. The other name was Dram, which I thought would make a great name for a boy dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the latest iteration that has come up is Slancha, which works across all of them. Slancha, the toast for in Slancha.
Oh, okay.
Slancha. Not feeling slancha.
Is it a boy or girl?
We don't know yet because we got it. We're picking it tomorrow. We get the second pick of the litter. And so we've got we got 2 boys and a girl we like.
I think you should call him Sheepadoodle-Doo. It's so obvious.
Yeah, like I'm going to yell that out the back door when she's out back taking a dump. Sheepadoodle-Doo, come here.
Look, everyone, it brought a smile to everyone's face. The word sheepadoodle is amazing. You just add on the end of it. Marsha, do you like it?
I love sheepadoodle.
Let's see. Actually, Crumpler likes this one. Booker. I like that one. I can do that.
Good.
And Aaron Krause, the first rule of whiskey making, no dogs, then no distillery. You got to have a dog to have a distillery, either a dog or a cat. Talisker. I like Talisker. That could work.
Talisker.
As opposed to Talisker. Play on Talisker.
Oh, Talisker.
Talisker, yeah. Yeah, and Dave Kuhn suggested that as well. Name it Harris, as in Isle of Lewis Distillery, that being Tweed, thus wool, sheepdog. Okay, that's overthinking it.
I think the name will come to you after you know your dog.
Well, see, we have this whole page of dog names, potential dog names at the website. And Chris Ratcliffe, our dog. Yeah, that's going to go over real well. The decision is not mine. Mizuwara would be a good name every time you go to the vet. Oh, yeah. Aaron Krause, Copper for Copper Dog. Yeah, that could work. And as Bill Ricker points out, overthinking are us.
That's a good name right now. I think you'll get to know. I think the dog will come and the name will be there.
True.
Aardvark, yep.
When are you bringing this dog home?
In a couple of weeks, we actually, God forbid, I'm driving out to Utah to the breeders to pick this dog up.
Wow.
You are a man after my own heart.
Well, we're driving out. I didn't pick the breeder. My wife picked the breeder. And actually, I'm just going to do something really stupid here. I shouldn't do
We're going
this.
to show us photos.
Hang on a second here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I want to see.
Hang on a second here. I got to find the letter here.
Well, while you're doing that,
Just a second here. I can share the tab. This is the one we're looking at.
Oh,
That's the first picture.
I love how our whiskey conversation of it. Oh, that's a very cute.
Yeah.
And then we're also looking at her.
Oh, how do you choose?
beautiful.
And she looks like a little lady to me. I mean, she just,
She does look like a little lady.
and then that's the one I think if we get him, we're going to name him Dram.
He looks like a dram.
Because he looks like the color of whiskey almost in some ways.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny, Mark.
So, yeah, so be that as it may, yes, that's just, oh, what the hell. Did we lose Marsha?
I think her computer died.
We lost Marsha. Okay.
You may have lost her.
Well, that's a sign that it's probably time to hang it up for the night, guys. Hey, thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Mark.
Oh,
We absolutely appreciate your support and that you've given us, and you've certainly given me throughout the years. I know we've worked together quite a bit. So
Yeah, and and I'll tell you the same thing I told you on the webinar the other night, Heather. I remember when we did the interview when you first signed on with Marsha to go down to Austin, and I said, do not screw this up because you will screw it up for every whiskey writer that ever wants to think about actually getting into making whiskey. You have not screwed it up.
No,
Well done.
I agree.
Thanks,
Cheers.
it's a great team.
So thank you all for joining us. And let me go ahead and just say a few closing words here. Guys, thank you for for putting up with us for this little round of fun and games we call the Whiskey Wednesday webcast. We'll be back on Friday night for the happy hour webcast and, of course, a new episode of WhiskyCast this weekend. I want to thank all of our guests. And Randy Prasse texted me after this. He was going to announce something that we didn't get to because I didn't see the private text he sent me during the interview because I was too busy doing the interview. But next year, one thing that the Bourbon Festival has never done in its 29 years until now is next year they are doing 10 different barrel picks from 10 different distilleries that will go on sale during the Bourbon Festival. And he wanted to announce that on the show, and I didn't see it in time to give him a chance to do so. So I wanted to announce it here for him and pass that along. They're actually going to do barrel picks for next year, and folks, those are going to be fun.
Cool.
So, and let me just bring everybody back in here because I just saw 3 people start drooling when they heard of that news.
That's great.
Because if you got Bourbon Festival barrel picks with the master distillers doing their own picks for each distillery, oh, that's going to be fun.
That'll be fun.
And
Yeah.
expensive. So, be that as it may, thanks for joining us. We'll see you on Friday night. Thanks again to our guests from Milam Greene Distillery, Marsha Milam, Heather Greene, Jordan Osborne, Marlene Holmes, and of course, Randy Prasse from the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, who joined us earlier. We'll see you on Friday night, everybody. Good night, all. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.